Welcome to my Landrover. It's a 1989 ex-military 110, also commonly known as a Parenti. This one's a fairly rare hardtop survey model. It would have been used for mapping back when it was in the military. It's not my first Land Rover. Back in 1996 I caught the off-roading bug, so to speak, and I purchased a 1976 Series 3 109. I had a lot of fun with the Series 3, but quickly came to realise that I wasn't the biggest fan of the leaf springs, the drum brakes, especially after you went through a river crossing, and I'd had a Holden 202 six-cylinder fitted to it, which had horrible fuel consumption. So this propelled me to buy my first Parenti, which I got from Butterham in Queensland from British Off-Road. So they'd purchased it off the Army as basically just a chassis and body, and they'd started piecing it back together using Defender parts. So I trailered it back to Canberra using my Series 3, together with an engine and a gearbox from Anderson's Landrover in Hervey Bay. So I'd had a trip planned to go to Cape York about 6 months after acquiring it. So I was motivated to try and get it on the road to try and take it up to Cape York. It was a bit of a rush, but I managed to get it all done in time and found it was a vast improvement on the Series 3, especially with the coil spring suspension. Then in 2013, this one became available, and so I replaced my old FFR soft top with this survey model. So to me, this car it really is a freedom machine for me. I'd struggle to not have something that I could escape into the bush with. In 2020, during those devastating Australian bushfires, I had a bit of an epiphany. I knew anthropogenic climate change was real and happening, but it really brought home the urgency in which we needed to act and do stuff to prevent it. So it really made me think about, well, what can I do to help prevent, climate change and all its bad aspects? Realised the first step I needed to do was sit down and work out where all my own emissions came from. Doing this made me realise how horrific the emissions were from my vehicles compared to anything else I was doing. At this time I was actually started my first EV conversion, which is a BMW E46. I was just doing it out of interest as a fun thing to do. Yeah, it sort of made me decide that the Land Rover would be the next priority after that, especially considering being a diesel, which is even worse for emissions. But in the meantime, I thought, well, one way to reduce the emissions is literally just to drive it less. So more local trips rather than, the long distance trips. So then a few months later in 2020, I came across a couple of hail damaged Nissan Leafs that I managed to get from the salvage auctions really cheap for $5,000 each. They were hail damaged from the massive hailstorm we had at the start of 2020 in Canberra. So this is Camille's first driving an electric car, and Digger's first riding an electric car. So, okay, you got key somewhere near you.
Yeah, press the button.
You could try that.
It's not on though.
Yeah, that's on. It's running.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh. Let's try.
Going for a drive in an electric car. The windscreen needs a bit of cleaning. Camille seems to be all over how to drive an electric car.
Point shoot.
Pretty much.
I reckon you should register this thing.
The better one of the two Leafs I fixed up and put on the road, and it became our first real-world experience of owning an electric car. Even though it was a Generation 1 2012 Nissan Leaf with a fairly degraded battery, we're really surprised at how much nicer it was to drive than our fossil-fueled alternatives. Then she got a job in Wollongong, which was a distance of 240 kilometres each way. So the Leaf wasn't quite practical for those longer distance trips. And she didn't want to go back to her old Subaru Forester because of the emissions. So she purchased a MG ZS EV, which had much better range than the Leaf. So this is our electric MG. It's been a fantastic car. I've had it for about 20 months now. Done about 40,000 Ks in that time, including long trips. Actually, Camille just got back from driving to Adelaide on Monday, and she's going to Wollongong tomorrow. It saved us about 9.5 tonnes of CO2 in that time, and probably about $7,000 in fueling costs, and been an absolute joy to drive. Awesome being able to just charge from excess solar power at home, and long trips we use the PlugShare app, which makes it really easy to navigate between those fast charging points. So living with this and doing long trips has definitely educated me on what sort of range I'm going to want in the Landrover. So my motivation for converting the Landrover to EV was purely based on environmental reasons, which is well and truly enough reason. But after living with an EV, realised it was just going to make it a heaps better machine anyway. So let's go through some of the other benefits. The power it's going to have, it will have higher horsepower and torque figures, but more importantly, it'll have that torque characteristics that electric motors give you. That is, they give you 100% torque from 0 RPM, and in a four-wheel drive especially, that's going to be really good. Like, you want really low down torque in a four-wheel drive. You'll never have to think about which gear is going to be necessary for whatever you're doing at the time, because it's always going to be in the correct gear. Give you heaps of speed because they rev so much, and it can give you heaps of low down grunt because the characteristic of the motor. So you never have to worry about if you need to be in high or low range, or second gear or third gear. Actually, I don't think we are there yet. Oh, I did stuff that up. I tried fourth gear and it was too high, and when you start having to change. Another big advantage is regenerative braking, so regenerative braking is basically when you're slowing down, it turns the motor into a generator, which slows you down as well as charges the battery. So other than the obvious efficiency benefit you get from reclaiming some of that kinetic energy, you're also not using the friction brakes nearly as much as you normally would, and that's a high maintenance item. Also, being an electric drivetrain, it's a much simpler system, and which makes it a lot more reliable and virtually maintenance free. Also, it's going to be heaps quieter, which is going to be really nice, especially, going forward driving along the tracks and being able to listen to birds with the windows open, that sort of thing. That's going to be pretty cool. Another thing I much prefer with an EV is the recharging process compared to the refueling process. I find it such a hassle taking this to the fuel station now. So, typically with an EV, most of the time you get home and you just plug it into a power point, and, it's a few seconds to do that. And we have a home automation system, so it can be switched on and off for inside or automatically, depending on how much solar we got. So you can always leave on a trip with a full charge. This how it is with diesel. You can never leave with a full tank of diesel unless I fill it up with a jerry can. Everyday day-to-day use, it's heaps more convenient. But even long trips, I still prefer going to a fast charger than I do going to a petrol station. Even though, it takes a bit longer, it's a different thing because you're combining that with your stop every 2 or 3 hours. You need to stop and take a wee, or get something to eat, or get a coffee, or take the dog for a walk, whatever it is. So it's sort of combined in the whole thing, whereas in a petrol or diesel car, you have to actually go to a petrol station. Like, that's all you do at the petrol station is put petrol in, and you stand there and fill it up, and it doesn't take that long. But it's sort of a bit of a pain. It's not an enjoyable thing. Another cool thing I'm looking forward to being able to do is I can actually charge the car while I'm camping. I already have a system. I've got a 5 kilowatt inverter there with about 4 kilowatt hours of lithium batteries I've made and 600 watts of solar panels on the roof. So theoretically, I can charge the car while I'm camping. Another thing that people don't realise too, because they just sort of look at the initial cost of an EV, is you end up saving money. It ends up being cheaper because the money you invest pays off down the track. So this is going to cost me about 35 grand to convert. I mean, that's a lot of money, isn't it? But when you sit down and actually work out how much you're spending on refueling your car, you're never spending all that money in one go, so it sort of creeps up. But if you sat down and worked out how much you spend on petrol or diesel every year and then add that up over 5 years or add that up over 10 years, you'd be scared how much you pay. And well, let's work that out. I'll probably do maybe 30,000 Ks a year, something like that. And it gets about 12 litres per 100 Ks. So that works out at 3,600 litres. Diesel at the moment, it's been like this for a little while now, is $2.40 a litre. It works out at 8,600 and something. So, okay, let's compare that to when it's electric. I'm guessing it's probably going to get 25 kilowatt hours per 100. That's 7,500 kilowatt hours. So fast chargers generally cost about 40 cents a kilowatt hour. Some are more, some are less, some are free. Let's call it 40 cents a kilowatt hour on average. It's $3,000. So obviously that's a fair bit cheaper than $8,600, but that's if I'm purely fast charging this, and that's not going to be the case. Our MG, 5 to 10% might be fast chargers. This will probably be a bit more on long trips. We can charge at home for free, and even on long trips, you'll quite likely find a power point that you can use for free, or there's fast chargers you can use for free. If I'm camping, obviously, solar powered, that'll be free. Let's say 50% of the time is fast chargers. It's going to be more than the MG because I'm going to do longer trips in this. So yeah, that ends up being, what, $1,500. So take away $1,500 from the $8,600 keeping it diesel. That's $7,100 every year in savings. That adds up pretty quick. So in other words, in 5 years, it's the cost of the conversion. And that's not taking into account maintenance costs, which will be far less in this as well. Let's talk about the cons. It's going to have less range. I'm predicting it'll have a range of about 250 Ks, might get up to 300 Ks if I'm lucky. On a bad day, I might only get 200 Ks of range. And at the moment, it gets 500 Ks of range. To be honest, it doesn't bother me at all. Our MG has 240 Ks of real world range, sometimes more, sometimes less. And it's totally adequate to get between all those fast charging points. So that doesn't bother me at all. As we move into the future, less and less range is going to be needed because there's so many more fast chargers going in. So we've talked about all those extra benefits. Obviously the environmental benefit is, far outweighs anything, because if we don't have a human habitable planet, you can't go forward driving. We've already experienced that with all the massive rains we've had, sort of stopped a lot of stuff, and then fires. You can't really go camping when the bush is burning around you. So that's why I'm converting this baby to electric. It's going to be an awesome, fun project. Really looking forward to doing it. Really looking forward to getting it done. I'll be posting up more videos on the process, and I'm hoping that'll sort of help other people if they're thinking of doing the same sort of thing. So thanks for listening to why I'm doing this, and thanks for watching.